Acura knows everybody likes them. They just wish they could create some passion, and they think they have the answer to that. That's this week on Motoring 2000.
TSN's Motoring 2000 is brought to you by Quaker State Motor Oils, formulated for the vehicles you drive and the way you drive them, and Midas Car Care, the way it should be.
This week we're driving the Type S, not the S-Type or S2000, but the Type S. And this is the newest rocket from Acura, and we'll tell you more about this car later on. But you know, it was Honda that began the Japanese invasion into North America in the late 60s. And of course, it turned out to be a good thing for everyone. The domestics pulled up their socks and began building better cars, and you and I had more choice. But you know, even today, there are many North Americans who will tell you, I wouldn't be caught dead in anything but a domestic vehicle. Well, if you happen to be among that group, I advise you to sit down during our first story. It could be a little unsettling. In fact, it could be entitled, Who Would Have Thought? Unless you've been living in a cave for the past few years, you know the automotive industry is changing. Amalgamations and mergers are the buzzwords as larger companies are formed. But one company that has resisted the merger temptation is Honda. So a few eyebrows were raised with news that Honda might soon be supplying engines to General Motors.
Honda believes philosophically that small is smart. We don't necessarily believe that becoming larger necessarily makes for a better company. So what Honda's looking for is to improve our situation the best way that we can. So the situation with General Motors is a unique agreement where we will be supplying them with engines, and they will be supplying through their Isuzu subsidiary diesel engines for Honda's European operations.
I don't think it's that surprising. The mergers that are going on are showing that people are working together. The companies are working together in terms of technologies. Nobody can afford to develop every little bit of a car all by themselves to the nth degree. So you're buying strengths. You're buying engineering strengths that one would have, and they're donating or giving strengths that they have.
SSR will appeal to enthusiasts.
There isn't too much experience at the highest levels of General Motors in the American automobile business. There's next to none. You have to go down 4, 5, 6 levels in the General Motors organization before you find anybody that knows much about the American car business. They're smart people, but they're pretty inexperienced in this car business. We've seen, the announcement that they're going to put Honda engines in General Motors cars. Well, if you want a car with a Honda engine, why not buy a Honda? What is the point of buying a General Motors car with a Honda engine? And what are all those people in powertrain doing if they have to buy 6-cylinder engines from a Japanese competitor?
Honda has a particular strength at bringing to market quickly engines that can meet emission standards. They seem to be the best at that, and I think GM's buying into that in terms of, like, they have to have ULEVs for California and various other emission standards, and Honda engines give them that ability right off the bat.
Well, Honda is actually the largest manufacturer of engines in the world. Between our motorcycle, ATV, power equipment and automobile divisions, we are creating approximately 10 million new customers every year around the world.
Do you see a day when a Buick LeSabre will have a Honda engine? Will that be almost too much of a cultural thing for North Americans?
I'll bet that you won't see a Honda badge under the hood of a Buick. But will you see Honda technology? If this plan were to go through, yes, I think you might, for sure.
I would think that if BMW announced they were going to put Nissan engines in 100,000 5 Series, BMW people in Germany would probably burn down the headquarters of the building and lynch the executives, justifiably.
It's incredible to see how things have developed, and nobody knows where this is going to go in the future. But we definitely believe that Honda will stay as an independent company, but from time to time may need to make these kind of arrangements with other manufacturers as we go forward.
Say, old Pete's sure in a good mood. Oh, you beautiful dreamboat, you. Hi, Pete. You look mighty pleased with yourself. Well, Bob, I ought to be. I've just made the best deal of my life. Would it have anything to do with this new Olds 88? It sure would. Old Pete finally wised up. He finally saw the light. Why, do you know that I've been paying as much for those little so-called low-price jobs as I paid for this Olds 88? Look at those lines. And this new bumper and grill. And this rocket engine. Say, I never knew a car could perform like this one. I don't know why I'm telling you all this. You sell Oldsmobiles. Yes, Pete, but it's always nice to hear from a satisfied customer. Well, you've got one here. Well, there you are. Why don't you stop by your Oldsmobile dealer? Discover how easy it is to drive home in an Oldsmobile 88 of your very own.
If you want affordable, this week on Test Drive, we're going to give it to you. This is one of the least expensive vehicles for sale in Canada, the 2000 Kia Sephia.
It takes a certain amount of courage to build or buy a car that many have never heard of, but that's exactly what Kia are hoping to do with the Sephia. Of course, it can be done, as Hyundai, Kia's parent corporation, has shown. Power comes from a 16-valve twin cam that displaces 1.8 litres and produces 125 ponies. While reasonably peppy at low speeds, the noise builds steadily as you venture up the rev range to access the power. Torque comes in at 108 pounds-feet and likewise tops out at a busy 4,500 RPM. All of that said, the Sephia cruises at the legal speed limit in a reasonably quiet manner. Mated with this engine is a choice of a 5-speed manual or an automatic transmission. The better choice is definitely the manual, as it provides decent ratios and a progressive and light clutch. The automatic does not make the same use of the engine's power, delivering a somewhat lackluster feel, particularly off the line.
Generally speaking, when a manufacturer puts a warning label on a vehicle, it's for their protection and not yours, but that's not the case with this Sephia. This warning label, well, it warns you that the deck lid doesn't go very far back, and bashing your head is a very real possibility. So do yourself a favour, get a little helper and have them load and unload the trunk. Her head's not going to get bashed.
The Sephia employs McPherson struts at all 4 corners and roll bars at both ends. Factor in the large 185/65 R14 tyres and the ride and handling are more than acceptable. In the pylon test, body roll was controlled and understeer reasonably benign.
The drawback with the Sephia's dynamic demeanour has to do with the steering. It's dull, lifeless and very wooden to the feel. It's also heavy in slow manoeuvres. It otherwise detracts from a very agile car.
Stopping power comes from a front disc rear drum design that has the desired effect. The stops are short, measuring about 118 feet from 80k, and the threshold is easy to find. That means you don't lock them up unnecessarily. Sadly though, anti-lock brakes are conspicuous by their absence.
Whilst a loaded Sephia comes with all the right equipment, power locks, windows, mirrors, a decent set of gauges, cruise controls mounted on the steering wheel, air conditioning, climate control and a decent sounding radio. The drawback is that they're all arranged in a very slab-like fashion and at the extremity of your reach. It points to the Sephia's dated design.
Sephia's biggest problem, aside from the dated design, is the cost. To step up from the base model to our LS Tester cost $1,950, to which you must add an additional $800 for the power package. Then there's of course another $950 or so for the automatic transmission. That pushes the as-tested price towards $17,000.
You know, if this were motoring 90, the prognosis for this Sephia would be very good. Unfortunately, it's motoring 2000, and so it speaks to the dated design of this vehicle. However, not all is lost, because if Hyundai can teach Kia some of their magic, this car company could just blossom.
Time to update our long-term Mazda MPV. With the odometer just passing 11,000 clicks, the consensus is that Mazda has hit the mark on this all-new vehicle. Learning from the competition, the MPV is equipped with 2 sliding doors, as well as the oh-so-handy disappearing third seat. Sure, it was Honda's idea, but who's complaining? The power plant is a Ford-derived 2.5-liter V6. Although smaller than last year's 3-liter, horsepower is up 15 to 170. The ride has been exceptional, gliding over rough roads with ease. We'll check out a couple of pet peeves on our next update.
Our Midas tip of the week concerns shocks and struts. I'm sure you're well aware that when they go bad, you've got a poor handling car, a poor ride, and accelerated tire wear. But did you also know that they can greatly affect your stopping distance? There's a rear strut out of an '88 Buick Regal, and you can see that in the top several inches of its travel, it's giving me absolutely no resistance, just bounces in and out with no resistance. You can see a lot of oil on the outside. That's an indication that it's leaked. There's a front shock absorber out of a '91 GM Astra or Safari minivan. Same deal, no resistance in either direction. And there's the other front shock out of the same GM minivan that was still trying to do its thing. You can see that it's given me a lot of fight to moving it in either direction. And that's what shocks and struts do. They hydraulically dampen the tendency of the suspension to bounce up and down after you've gone over a bump. Now, when these things are in a failed condition, as I showed you with the strut and this other shock, it can also greatly increase your stopping distance during a panic stop. Imagine a panic stop. You know that the car has a tendency to nosedive in the first place. If the shocks and struts are bad, that tendency to nosedive will be greatly exaggerated to the point where it'll take a lot of weight off the rear wheels and you won't get sufficient rear braking to bring that vehicle safely to a stop. So therefore, can dramatically increase your stopping distance. By replacing the shocks and or struts when they're bad, you can get that vehicle under control a lot better in a panic stop. That's your Midas tip of the week.
The 3.2 CL is a sports coupe. It's supposed to help project Acura as a performance luxury marque, and it's a very significant vehicle to us in that it's a step-up vehicle for our Accord and perhaps our Integra owners into a more luxurious and more sporty coupe.
Well, the global midsize platform first launched in '98 with the Accord series. Is now up to, this is the 9th product off that platform. The powertrain is in the base version of the car, we say the premium grade, is shared with the Acura TL. The Type S version of this car, the 3.2 CL Type S, is all new power plant, 260 horsepower. It's a real screamer. It's got a very wide and flat torque curve, so a nice characteristic of low-end torque for everyday use in driving, and then of course power comes on at the high end. We stretch the red line up to close to 7,000 RPM, so when you use that, you know, getting on the freeway or what have you, it really makes it really comes on strong, and it pulls for a long time, and you know it's there. We put some emotion back into Acura, I think, with the Type S in particular, and set fairly high dynamic targets. Again, it's a front-wheel drive car, but it's not impossible to raise the bar on performance. So we set out, and with the new engine, the high-performance engine, and bigger wheels and tires, and so on, we decided to create in this Type S version a sportier more rewarding dynamic experience.
You know, coupes look great, but if you've ever been a passenger in the back seat, you know that a coupe is strictly a two-person vehicle. First, there's little room back there, and second, it's a pain in the butt getting in and out. Well, Acura has helped ease the pain a bit. If you happen to be stuck in the back on either the passenger or driver's side and want to get out, simply a matter of pulling the lever, and then once you're out, everything automatically goes back into place. It's now time to head to the garage and join Bill Gardner. Now, as we heard earlier, Honda will be supplying General Motors with engines in the future. Now, Bill Gardner owns a Honda Civic. He also owns a GM pickup truck. So the question is, Bill, a few years down the road, you're looking for a new pickup truck. You lift the hood, and what do you find underneath? A Honda engine.
Brad, did hell freeze over? Somebody didn't tell me? You'll be reading about me committing suicide on that day, I'll tell you. I've had quite a few Honda motorcycles, and I love them. I've got a Honda Civic, great little car, but when it comes to pickup trucks, I don't know, I want that made in North America engine in there, thanks very much. Anyhow, the day will probably happen and I'll have to eat my words, but no thanks. Anyhow, we want to talk about a problem that comes up pretty common these days around an auto repair shop, and that's when a car comes in with a major coolant leak. Now, when you see a major coolant leak where the coolant's running 15 or 20 feet away from the car, you're thinking blown hose, blown water pump, radiator, something like that. In a lot of cases these days, we find that the heater cores let go. Now, years ago when heater cores let go, it was a small leak. You got a bad smell inside the car. You got a little bit of white smoke coming out the vents. It was a minor leak. You could keep driving it and put up with that inconvenience. But nowadays, when a heater core lets go, sometimes it empties the cooling system in a minute or two, and you've got to get that thing towed in, and you may be looking at an overheated engine if you don't pick up on the symptoms in an awful big hurry. There's the part in question, the heater core. This is out of our 91 Corsica that we're working on, and there's the actual problem with this one, this split in the inlet line, and there's a split there as well. And when that happens, we've got obviously a major coolant leak because there's a hose that comes over here and gets to about there, and then a spring clamp that holds it on. So with that split in there, the coolant just comes gushing out that crack and just empties onto the ground. Now typically when these things go, they usually split down here as well, where they're forced over the two nipples. You can see some rings around here. There's little barbs on these nipples on the heater core, and then this plastic pipe forces over there. They heat it up and force it over there. And they quite often split in this area all the way down to about here. Once again, major coolant leak. Now the core is made out of aluminum. These tanks are plastic here, and it's held together with these little claws here, and there's a seal in between the plastic and aluminum. There's no solder in this thing. It's almost weightless. You can see the fins in here. The coolant goes through these tubes right here and then exchanges heat into these fins, and your blower motor via a duct directs a lot of air through this, and that exchanges heat into the interior of the car to warm up your interior and defrost the windows. Okay, here's where the heater core lives in most cars and light trucks. Underneath the dash, in most cases installed from inside the car, about 90% of the time. On this Corsica, it's down by the passenger's feet, sort of right between the driver and passenger's feet, center of the car, right up against the firewall. Now those two holes, this one and this one, are where those plastic nipples that I showed you that had split, they protrude through those two holes out into the engine base so they can be hooked up to the heater hoses. That third hole right over there is where the antifreeze empties out when the heater core blows so that the carpet doesn't flood. And also in the summertime, when you see an air-conditioned car like this one idling, for example, on a hot, humid day, you'll see clean water running out from underneath the car. It empties out through that hole as well. And then you hook up your heater hose there. It just popped through, and there's two little metal straps that secure the heater core up into the heater case of the car and keep it securely in there. Then you put the plastic cover over to finish the job off, hook the hoses up, and put your new antifreeze in. There's our heater and air conditioning fan right here. This moves all the air through the interior of the car to facilitate heater, defroster, and air conditioning. And via some ducts, it carries that heat over and across the surface of the heater core to exchange heat inside the car. Now this part's about $100 for this particular car, the 91 Corsica, and the labor varies from the easiest cars about an hour up to 5 or 6 hours on some cars where it's a more difficult operation to change. But as I mentioned earlier, on the late model cars with these plastic and aluminum heater cores, when they let go, you've got a big time leak. you've got to get it over to the side of the road or get it towed in, because in most cases it's going to empty that cooling system in really short order. Till next week, I'm Bill Gardner for Motoring 2000.
What does buying a microwave oven have to do with buying a new car? Well, not much. One of my pet peeves next on Kenzie's Corner. You go to the store and buy a nice new microwave oven, and the sales guy says that'll be $249.95 plus tax, and you say fine. Then he says, oh, by the way, I'm going to open that box and polish it up a bit with a rag, and that'll cost you an extra $10. And then he says, oh yeah, and it costs us $7 to ship it from the factory, so you got to pay extra for that. What's your reaction? Well, after you stop laughing, you stomp out of the store. But you come to a car dealership, and that's the treatment you get. You pay $20, $30, $50,000 for a car, and then they say, well, there'll be an extra $500 for pre-delivery inspection. What's that mean? Well, some teenager slaps on the wheel covers and washes the car. Now, all I'm hearing from the car companies these days is quality, quality, quality. We got inspectors here, we got inspectors there. So what's left to inspect at the dealership? And why should you pay extra for it? And then there's freight. Again, why should you pay the freight? You should pardon the expression. Now, most of the domestic car dealers have equalized freight across the country. Now, I guess that's to help national unity or something. But when you buy a Chevy pickup truck in Oshawa where they're built and you pay $750 freight? What kind of deal is that? But my favorite is the so-called factory drive-away. This is where the dealers come to the factory and drive the cars back to their stores. And then they charge your freight for them. And it's a used car. Now, I know the car makers are all looking to get a low advertised price, but they're also trying to eliminate irritants to consumers in the showroom, and this is one of the favorites. Why should you have to pay extra for these things? If they are real costs, they should be built into the price of the product, just like they are in my new microwave. I'm Jim Kenzie.
You know, just 10 years ago, Honda had 4 model lines. Now, along with Acura, they have 12. And they're about to begin a new relationship with the world's largest car manufacturer. Now, Honda likes to pride itself in staying small. But history has proven this is a company that will not stand still. And there's no indication that is about to change. And you know what? Maybe that's not a bad thing after all. That's it for now. We'll see you next week as we continue to bring you more stories about cars and the people who drive them.
TSN's Motoring 2000 has been brought to you by Quaker State Motor Oils, formulated for the vehicles you drive and the way you drive them, and Midas Car Care, the way it should be.